Picture an ordinary 5-gallon bucket from a hardware store. Now imagine it buried deep in the dirt off a remote highway, or hidden in a dense patch of woods, sitting completely undisturbed for years. Inside that bucket is a carefully curated cache: firearms, zip ties, and cash. It's a pre-staged trap that federal investigators refer to as a kill kit. To his neighbors in Anchorage, Israel Keyes was a reliable general contractor and a dedicated father. But behind that ordinary life, he was scouting remote burial sites and refining a system of violence designed to leave no forensic trail. His methodology prioritized anonymity. Whenever he felt the urge to strike, he would travel far from his home, dig up one of his hidden kits, and target a complete stranger. Male or female, old or young, alone or in a group, it didn't matter. By choosing victims purely as targets of opportunity, he ensured there was no logical connection back to himself. He transformed the landscape of the country into a network of pre-planned hunting grounds. Law enforcement was up against a ghost, a man who operated with total discipline, preparing for his crimes years before he ever selected a victim. On the night of February 1st, 2012, the temperature in Anchorage, Alaska was bitter and freezing. 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was nearing the end of her shift at the Common Grounds coffee kiosk. She was working alone in the brightly lit, teal-colored shack. A man walked up to the window and ordered an Americano. As Samantha turned around to hand him his drink, he pulled out a gun. He told her he was holding up the coffee shop, a ruse intended to keep her compliant by offering the false hope that she would be safe if she just handed over the money. Keyes took the cash from the register, but then he forced Samantha out into the cold parking lot and into his waiting truck. Keyes drove Samantha to his own property and locked her inside his work shed. He anchored a rope to the wall around her neck, turned on a couple of space heaters to warm the freezing air, and blasted a radio at full volume to drown out any sound she might make. After securing his hostage, Keyes walked out of the shed and back into his house. He checked on his sleeping daughter and his girlfriend, poured himself a glass of wine, and sat down to relax. A few hours later, he killed Samantha. Then he went back inside, woke his daughter, cooked her breakfast, and hopped in a cab to the airport to leave on a 2-week luxury family cruise out of New Orleans. When Keyes finally returned from his vacation, he initiated an elaborate, cruel hoax to extort ransom money from Samantha's family. He retrieved her body, dressed her in new clothes, and applied heavy makeup to her face. Then, he meticulously stitched her eyelids open to give the illusion she was still alert, snapping a terrifying proof-of-life photograph of her posed next to a February 13th edition of the Anchorage Daily News. Following instructions left in a local park, Samantha's father deposited $30,000 into his daughter's debit account. The FBI waited. Weeks later, the card finally began pinging. Investigators tracked a sudden string of ATM withdrawals moving across Arizona, New Mexico, and steadily east into Texas. Law enforcement rushed to each stop, constantly missing the suspect, but surveillance captured his vehicle, a white Ford Focus. On the morning of March 13th, a Texas Highway Patrol officer spotted the white sedan sitting quietly in a hotel parking lot. When the driver finally got behind the wheel and pulled his vehicle onto the road, he made a tiny error, driving exactly 2 miles per hour over the speed limit. The officer instantly pulled him over. Inside the trunk, police found a ski mask, a firearm, and Samantha's cell phone. A 2-mile-per-hour oversight ended a spree that had spanned years and thousands of miles, finally placing Israel Keyes into federal custody. In the interrogation room, Keyes was entirely relaxed. Before he would admit to anything, he laid out his terms. He wanted a peanut butter Snickers, a cigar, and an Americano. Once he had them, he began to speak. Keyes broke down the logistics of the abduction and disposal with the detachment of a man reviewing a project blueprint. As agents listened to his detailed descriptions of body placement and timing, they realized they were hearing from a man who had refined his process over years of practice. Keyes confessed to the murder of Samantha Koenig, and then admitted to crossing the country to kill an older couple in Vermont. He spoke of his crimes with a mechanical precision, but he refused to surrender his final piece of leverage, the true scope of his actions. In December of 2012, before he could be pressed to name the rest of his victims, Keyes took his own life in his jail cell. Authorities were left with little more than a cryptic drawing he left behind in his cell, sketched in his own blood. Based on those markings, the FBI estimates he murdered at least 11 people. Keyes is dead, but his infrastructure survives. Today, multiple victims remain unidentified, and unknown numbers of his kill kits are still buried across the country, waiting silently in the dark.